Hello, welcome to Papa Nick's Music. I am, as always, your host, Papa Nick Lewis. And today, I'm gonna bump Paul McCartney one more week into the future. Last week, I posted a video in which I talked about the kerfuffle between Bruce Springsteen and Donald Trump, and I referred to the modern right-wing conservative ideology as it lives here in the United States, as being something based on the unprovable and or the counterfactual. And it seems to me that if I'm going to call people liars, I should be a little bit more thorough in my dismissal of what they say as being counterfactual. So here we go. The first counterfactual statement that I claimed that modern right-wing American conservatives believe is that undocumented immigrants are violent criminals. A lot of conservatives apparently seem to believe that undocumented immigration leads to a rise in violent crime because, undocumented immigrants are violent. They're sending us their murderers and their rapists. One particularly vocal person has said, it took me all of 2 minutes to disprove this afternoon when I was getting ready to do this video. I sat down at my computer and I Googled immigrants and violent crime. And all I did was I looked for the first listing that was not a news article or a blog. And it was the fifth hit. The fifth item that was listed was for an article posted to the National Institutes of Health. There was an earlier hit for a page posted at the National Institute of Justice, but that was removed as the Department of Justice is currently reviewing its websites and materials in accordance with recent executive orders and related guidance. In other words, we had to take this down because it irritates our boss. But the link I found, got it right down here, is pmc.ncbi.nih.gov. Type that into your browser and it takes you to a study entitled, Does Undocumented Immigration Increase Violent Crime? By Michael T. Light from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and Ty Miller from Purdue. Originally published in Criminology on March 25th, 2018. So it's a few years old. So what have they found? They found that the results from fixed effects regression models reveal that undocumented immigration does not increase violence. Rather, the relationship between undocumented immigration and violent crime is generally negative, although not significant in all specifications. Using supplemental models of victimization data and instrumental variable methods, we find little evidence that these results are due to decreased reporting or selective migration to avoid crime. I could find even more, but this study is on par with others I've seen. If it's a reputable study done by legitimate social scientists, it shows that immigrants are, if anything, less likely to be criminals, violent or otherwise, than native citizens. And before you pipe in with that, but they're here illegally, so their very existence is criminal nonsense, no. Illegal immigration is a civil offense, not a criminal one, and yes, that makes a difference. If it's a news article from a conservatively biased source, it will be reporting of some bullshit thing somebody said, which is not reporting what is objectively, factually true. And if it's from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, it will be incomplete data. Like this page, that reports arrests and convictions, but omits the total population, which renders the data pretty much meaningless. So, are undocumented immigrants violent criminals? The evidence says no. But hey, we can't justify denying due process and suspending habeas corpus without a frothingly violent population of criminal immigrants, so lying it is. The second lie that I talked about that I mentioned last week is the lie that voter fraud is rampant. No, it isn't. American elections are highly secure and have been for many years. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can take the Heritage Foundation's word for it. Who is the Heritage Foundation, you might ask? The Heritage Foundation is a conservative think tank that started in 1973 but came into its own when Ronald Reagan was elected president. They helped him with their mandate for leadership, just as they are helping the Trump administration with Project 2025. And no, I'm not trying to use Project 2025 as some sort of, liberal progressive dog whistle. I could just as easily spend my time playing Find the Person of Color on their staff pages. Like Waldo, there's only one. Or debunking old shit that they've been pumping out for years about how tax cuts lead to increased revenues, rejecting climate change, that sort of thing. So calm down. The Heritage Foundation, that Heritage Foundation says that American elections are safe and that voter fraud isn't rampant? If you know anything about the Heritage Foundation, that just doesn't pass the smell test. After all, Hans von Spakovsky, this dapper gent, is one of the prime drivers of the voter fraud grift, and he leads the Heritage Foundation's Election Law Reform Initiative. But here's the thing. In their determination, their enthusiasm to provide evidence for this claim, the Heritage Foundation started collecting information about election fraud. Any fraud, not just voter impersonation. And to make all our lives a little easier, they made that information available to the public. You can go to it. You can find it. It's the Heritage Foundation's website. Go there and access their election fraud database. The address is electionfraud.heritage.org. You can go there and you can search it. It's all there. All the proof. Well, they do hedge their bets. On the opening screen, they tell you that this database contains a sampling of proven instances of election fraud. They are trying very hard to convince you that these entries in this database are just the tip of the iceberg. But here's the thing. I'm sure there are interns who regularly scour the news looking for any and all infractions that they can include, and they do include a wide variety of issues, not just voter impersonation, but petition fraud, false registration. They even have a category titled miscellaneous, just in case they find something they can't categorize. I'm sure they are encouraged to find new examples, and let's face it, if voter fraud were rampant, wouldn't it be easy to find examples of it? When I first started thinking about doing this video, about 6 weeks ago now, the database had 1,576 entries, and I downloaded all of them so that I could work through the list. Today, May 29th, the database has 1,584 entries. I'm not going to download and compare in order to update my numbers. I think I'm safe in using the 6-week-old numbers for reasons that you're going to see here in a bit. Now, like I said, these are examples of election fraud that the Heritage Foundation has been able to find. They range from someone voting in someone else's stead, to someone padding a petition for a ballot initiative, to someone registering to vote despite having a felony record. Like I said, it's a wide variety of issues. For each entry, we get the name of the person or organization involved, the year and state in which it happened, the type of case it is, the category of fraud it is, and finally, a link to a description of what the event is. My guess is that the Heritage Foundation doesn't really expect too many of us to click on that link. But I did. And because I downloaded the results as a CSV list, all of those descriptions were downloaded as well. One of the things I quickly discovered as I was reading these descriptions is that many of these entries didn't actually involve any votes cast. When I downloaded the database, there were 22 entries for irregularities that happened in 2024, the most recent year available. Of those 22, 8 were cases where no votes had been cast, and 10 were cases where only 1 or 2 votes had been cast. There was one biggie, the Harris County, Texas, 180th District Court judicial election, in which the presiding court ruled that 1,482 illegal votes were cast and therefore ordered a new election. Which leads me to another thing that I quickly noticed. This list is made up of people who have been caught and punished, arguing pretty strongly that we have adequate security in place. Just a thought. There are a few big cases in here, mostly ones that rack up as many as 9 or 10 votes, but the overwhelming majority of these entries are situations where only one vote was affected, the vote of the fraudster in question. But what the hey? Let's just go ahead and assume that these database entries have enough Harris County District Court level examples to bring the overall average per entry up to 100. Let's say that each one of these instances resulted in 100 fraudulent votes cast. This is very, very generous for us to do. We must be nice people. Another thing you notice when you start looking at the data is that these entries go all the way back to 1982. But hey, let's just pretend for a moment that all of these database entries happened in the same year. They very obviously didn't. We've got 43 years worth of data here. But hey, we're generous. We are nice people. Then when you read each description, you realize that these examples are pulled from all elections everywhere. City, county, state, national. But again, let's be nice. Let's just assume that all of these entries were involved solely in the presidential election of 2024. Now, again, this is obviously not the case. These data represent election fraud cases in all levels of elections for 43 years, but we're being nice. If we do these nice things, we end up with 157,600 fraudulent votes in the 2024 presidential election. You know, the election in which 154,585,663 people voted. So, if we completely bloat up the database numbers well beyond what they actually represent and put them all into one single election instead of every election for the last 43 goddamn years, they still only represent 0.1% of the votes. Now, you may think I'm crazy, but I've got to think that if election fraud were rampant, we'd have a bit more evidence than this paltry pile of nonsense. I can't tell if the database was started to support the grift or if it was the product of some poor bastard who believes the grift, but either way, the continued presence of this criminally lightweight and minuscule database highlights how safe and secure elections are here in the United States of America. Vanishingly few people attempt election fraud, and the security systems we have in place are more than suited to the task. But hey, we can't get down to the business of restricting voting rights unless we have some pretext for setting up these unnecessary barriers to voting. So lying it is. The last example of lying I gave last week was Elon Musk is a genius. I'm not going to bother with that one. Some things are simply too obvious to worry about explaining. And that's what I've been thinking about this week. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Are you surprised by these facts? Are you surprised that somebody would have to be told these facts? Drop that comment down below. You know I always love hearing from you. And don't worry, next week we're talking Paul McCartney. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed the chat. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you'd click the like button. While you're down there clicking, if you have not already done so, go ahead and click the subscribe button. It costs you nothing, but it means the world to me, so I very much appreciate it. If you do subscribe, I would appreciate it if you would also click the bell for notification. The YouTube folks appreciate that, so on their behalf, I thank you. Thanks again for hanging out with me today, and I hope that the rest of your day is pleasant. See you soon.